Hello, everybody. Welcome to another chapter 8 today, which is advice for educators in fostering creative ASD minds. I'm going to apologize in advance. It is Saturday evening, so everyone is out being a bunch of noise terrorists. So I'm in the front yard trying something different. So if somebody comes up and tries to sell me solar, I apologize. We went up to number 54 in Amazon's top 100 in our category, which is very cool. Thank you very much for that. That's all you guys sharing that out. People are buying copies for their friends. Like, hey, listen, you're autistic. No, I'm just kidding. It's been a lot of stuff like, hey, listen, I've been passing this on to people, and I think that this will help. But it's been kind of a fun thing seeing people buying stacks of the books, 2 or 3 books at a time, and I just appreciate it. So thank you guys. Thank you, Steve. I see you giving me a thumbs up. He sent me a picture of his copy just a few moments ago. So this is for educators, Chapter 8, Fostering Creative ASD Minds. In the biography by Walter Isaacson called Einstein, His Life and Universe, Albert Einstein despised the German education system. The rules, the memorization, the strict teachers. This is the direction we're headed in as a country. We're raising test takers and memorizers, not creative thinkers. It is more important to foster creative thinking. The ability to say, what if? The permission to fail. We don't allow this at all in modern education. We take our creative thinkers and we put video games in front of them. We give them rules and confines, and we seek to entertain or to silence them instead of giving them opportunity to be inspired. It is important for visual thinkers to be stimulated visually. This is one of the reasons Einstein was so despised as a student. The other reason was that he asked questions and sought to understand things fully. He wanted to push things forward for the sake of thinking because all of science would be improved. Let's dive into why both traits are difficult for teachers and our current education system. Our kids spend their entire days at school, listening to their teachers talk, and then they go home and they stare at screens and listen to other people talk. At no point are they putting their hands on what they are learning about. We have removed theater, music, art, and shop classes from school, all classes in which children that are on the spectrum have opportunities to thrive. We need to allow our children the opportunities to honor their design. And how will we ever do that if we treat all of our little learners exactly the same? Forcing a kid that knows all the answers to show their work makes them frustrated with the process. Their minds do not work like yours, and no amount of forcing them to will change this. Einstein, Mozart, Tesla, the little weirdos that go on to change the world often struggle at early ages. Aren't we fortunate that Einstein, Tesla, and Mozart continued on with their special interest despite downfalls and with learning in other areas? Isn't the world a better place because Temple Grandin has shared her obsession with the world? They all had people in their lives that fostered their love and their infatuation with learning and then pointed them in the right direction. They were all mentored. When I was very young, maybe 3 or 4 years old, I drew a picture of a castle. Then I drew a picture of grass with a moat and a bridge that went over it. And then I drew a picture of sky with birds and then clouds in it. Then I drew 2 more pictures that seemed unrelated. And then I put them all together like a cube, and I made a 3-dimensional picture of a castle scene. That's how my mind works. If I was 4 today, this may not have happened. I may have just been sitting in front of a video game, building worlds in there. This isn't necessarily a good thing. While I was volunteering in a kindergarten class, I asked all the kids while they were painting, what's your favorite thing to do after school? Almost every little boy mentioned the same violent video game. It's heartbreaking to me that all of these little boys are not being fostered intellectually. Visual thinkers, if they are not being shown an example or being allowed to put their hands on what they're learning about, they're still going to look for other things to entertain themselves. Genius, a television miniseries about Einstein's life, constantly shows a young Einstein giving visual examples for what he's thinking. He had practical thoughts on smaller scales that were able to be applied to answer great questions about the universe, and even better, open entire new fields of thought. Why? I never answer this question with because. It is intellectually lazy, and the incessant whys that I've gotten from my kids have led us down interesting and new paths where we all learn together the answer to our questions. 3- and 4-year-old children love to ask why. They're looking at the world around them and trying to make reason and sense out of it, and are also learning how to interact with the world around them. If we don't stifle the whys as children, they will continue as adults, and the world will become a better place. In education, we have 2 types of teachers. 1, hold all questions to the end teacher. 2, feel free to ask all the questions as they come up. Both will become one eventually if they are teaching an interesting topic to a child with Asperger's syndrome. We ask questions, but we are discouraged regularly from doing so. Some teachers also feel very confronted if they are asked the questions to which they don't know the answer. It is okay not to know the answers. You can always say, you know what, John? That's a great question, and I actually don't know the answer to it right now. But write that down and remind me after all of this, and we'll find out what the answer is, and I'll tell you. There are items that we fixate on as important, and we find it very difficult to move on if we don't address them. This is one of the reasons why I love my notebooks. I write down all of my questions so I could get answers, even if I don't get them answered by the speaker. The department store type fluorescent lights are absolutely awful that accompany most classrooms. The reason why they bother children on the spectrum so intensely is the pattern in the lights. The constant pulsing in the bulbs are timed to a sequence that give me a headache. I have to close my eyes or look out a window. Many of the textbooks are bright white or reading books, which further exacerbate that problem. So when I was younger, I carried a red and blue filter with me that I would put over everything to help me when I was reading from getting headaches. I kept them for years, and they were helpful when I was young. I also felt very cool reading a textbook in 4th grade with a colored filter over it. Set clear expectations for your classrooms. The word surprise is very exciting for many kids. Other kids can be caused a great deal of stress by the upset in routine. In the Marine Corps, as an infantryman, scheduling was the most stressful thing about my entire career. Going in and not knowing if I would be coming home that night, if we would be going out for 2 weeks to train, or doing a PowerPoint presentation. It caused constant anxiety, but forced me to adapt and overcome. This is not so easy for people when they develop comfort in routines. Posting classroom rules or expectations, visual images that accompany rules might be helpful with reminders. This can be helpful for children to remember bathroom procedures, when and how to ask questions, etc. Also, passing out an idea of what the expectations will be for the semester projects with due dates, and then reminding them regularly about upcoming assignments can be very helpful. A child with poor executive functioning skills and less help at home could intend to do a project and then be surprised when the due date arrives. Don't assume that every child has that sort of help at home, and don't assume that every child has the ability to keep up with everything on their own at home. It's okay for kids to cry, and it isn't something that we should be ashamed of. When I cry, I don't always need to be comforted. I'm just touched by something, and I need a moment to adjust while everyone else moves forward. I cried during the watchdog volunteer video at my kid's school in front of a room full of men that were not like me. Some of these men were asking if they should bring firearms to campus, like we're all being hired to be heroes and take out little child shooters. I am there to hang out with kids, be an extra ear, an extra body, and a helping hand. If we had more men that were interested in volunteering in classrooms and less that went out to buy ammunition every time that there was a school shooting, we might have less school shootings in this country. It's just a crazy hypothesis that I have that we may conquer fear with love and not more fear. In the Marine Corps, in every class I have taken as an adult, and in a few that I had as a kid, the teacher would allow tired students to stand up in the back of the class. This was wonderful for me, and I often took advantage of it. I go to the back of every room behind all the standers, and I stand. I move my knees back and forth over and over again, and it allows me to focus on the professor and not the other human beings in the room with me. I'm not back there flopping around all over the place. I'm just allowing myself to move in a way that you can't move when you're surrounded by people that are trying to pay attention. There is no other way for me to say this. We need to bring back art into education. We need to breathe life into it, not choke it out. Without theater, a young David Serpa would have no outlet to get me through the day today, and I would have been significantly more violent as a youth. Without music, I would have had no outlet to bring what I'm feeling out of me in a healthy way. Music brings us back to mathematics. In art, we find design. In shop, we give children the ability to think abstractly and then bring that into the physical world. By broadening our children's spectrums and exposures, we will find that there are more practical uses for the daughter that only likes anime and graphic design. Taking a kid that loves Legos and exposing them to engineering sets and little motors. Taking the internal world and making it practical and external gives the ASD community a way to bond to the world and sets our children up for success. It also gives the world back that sense of magic that so many of us are craving and the ability to think outside of our current circumstances. I talked to a man the other day who was telling me how he takes electronics and motors apart in his mind and puts them back together. I use my brain the same way, but I never got into electronics or motors, and so that was never fostered in me. Too often we take away the dinosaur. Temple Grandin gives an excellent speech about fostering and mentoring young children and turning their special interest into something of use. If they love their cars, use cars to talk about a math problem, and then give them visual reminders of the cars. I'm sorry about the dog barking. Like I said, it's Saturday and people are being noise terrorists. Einstein imagined throwing balls, riding trains, spiders, and firing a bullet through space to picture the way that the universe worked, and then explain that to the world. The theory of relativity was developed entirely in the brain of a visual thinker. So, who would Einstein be today in America's education system? We have an opportunity to embrace these thinkers and help them live in the world while fostering their creative genius. Instead, we continue to force square pegs into round holes by making the hole more round. It doesn't make any sense. We're not just forcing the square peg into the round hole, we are denying all of our children their creative edges that make them them, that separate them from the herd, and more than just their ability to take tests, but in their ability to see, analyze, and improve the world that we are living in. We are robbing them of their ability to find identity and then find out how that identity can shape the world around them. So are we fostering creative thinkers in America? Thank you guys for tuning in. Kimberly said that her copy of All the World's a Stage, Unmasking Asperger's Syndrome or High Functioning Autism or Autism Spectrum Disorder or whatever it is they're calling it, I tend to be a little long-winded, will arrive there tomorrow. So thank you, Kim. I appreciate your support. Nancy already bought 2 copies, one for her and one for a friend. Thank you, Nancy, for tuning in. I appreciate that. And Jamie Lynn, Jamie B, I appreciate you tuning in as well. So if you guys are just watching and just tuning in, we're talking about Autism Spectrum Disorder for Educators, which is chapter 8 of my new book, which we just released, which is broken the top 100 on Amazon's top 100 in my section, which is a lot of fun. So yeah, we're just here trying to spread awareness for Autism Awareness Month. Feel free to share this video out and subscribe on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube for David Serpa at eXp Realty, and tune in all month as I read my book out loud for all of you fine people. Have a great day, everybody, and tune in next time.